I'm ready for like weird fall weather. And it's been raining, so I gotta mow the lawn. So obviously it's better to do that in like 70-degree weather than when it's 90 out. Um then July really didn't have to do it much because it wasn't rainy and it was just scorching hot, so the grass is just giving up. And now it's all like non-grass things.
Yeah, it's I mean yard work in the super hot is definitely
Mm.
not a ton of fun, but it's definitely the only thing that spooks me about weather getting cooler is the approach of winter, and
Mm.
slowly I'm not a big fan of the old winter.
Well, what we need to do is find the like I want to say Florida branch, but like Florida's humid.
It'd be
Yeah,
California, but
yeah,
only
like
if
the
everything but only if everything doesn't catch on fire all the
yeah,
time. So,
yeah. That's this is the issue. It's like anywhere you go, there's a downside. It's on fire. It's getting hit by hurricanes. It's getting hit by blizzards.
I think there was a phrase that one of my mentors at the NRC would use all the time. He was a statistics guy, and he would always use the phrase, "There is no free lunch."
Mm.
So it's perfect weather year round where it never rains, fires.
Mm.
And I mean, hey, one good thing about the cold up here is no alligators, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Limited bugs, no alligators. I have friends in like the Seattle area. And I'm like, oh, that seems nice. And they're like, oh yeah, so we had these wildfires. I'm like, no, I don't, how do you do that? It's just wet, famously super wet. Like,
Au
mm,
contraire, mon frère. But we'll let a couple more folks trickle in. I know we're only 3 minutes in here, and um, I definitely wanted to keep it short and sweet today because I know we're right before lunch on a Thursday in the summer. And especially too, I wanted to leave enough time for questions and being able to do just have some demo items to play around with
mm,
too, because I think um, kind of as a sneak peek for getting started, obviously a lot of AI tools just have a ton of hype that is out there, but I think it's important to see where the rubber actually meets the road and what the reality of a
mm.
AI tool looks like, especially some of these paid ones that are coming out, because it's so we're I'll give it till about yeah, I've got 11:03 on my clock on my screen, so 11:04, 11:05. But if anybody has some questions for beforehand that they're itching to have answered, I can either feel free to go ahead and submit them, and I'll uh, either make note to answer them while we're in the presentation or make
Mm.
sure to answer them there at the end. Well, I'll go ahead and get started, and the introductions are usually pretty easy. So, welcome everybody. My name is Will McPhee. I'm the CEO of System Support and Managed IT Service Provider out of Marshfield, Massachusetts. We've been in business since 1989, helping small businesses in the Boston area get the best out of their technology and more these days, keeping them protected from the threats that come down the pike. So while most of my talks are usually around security, some people have given me the nickname Dr. Doom. Today is something about a little more gain, a little more like how do you kind of take some technology use to the next level. So I wanted to talk today about Microsoft Copilot. We've been Microsoft partners for a very, very long time. And so here today, Copilot has obviously dominated some of the marketing. People have seen it everywhere. Microsoft has a big push around it. There's been a lot of changes with things like Copilot coming out. So I wanted to talk about hot on the scene, just the 6 things you got to know about Copilot for a small business. And especially this is mainly aimed towards a lot of professional services companies. So it would be very different if you were a software development shop. So An overview today, what we're going to go over for the six things are setting it up. How do you get this thing live? What does it actually do? What does it look like when you work with it? How do you work with prompts? What are the benefits of Copilot? And then what are some guardrails that you got to make sure are in place? So let's start with what does it do? So at its core, it's called a large language model, which is exactly like ChatGPT. Microsoft was one of the largest investors in OpenAI, and they had a big to do about having the first right of being able to take the OpenAI open source ChatGPT model and being able to incorporate it into their own ecosystem. So there's a lot of just like ChatGPT that you're going to see over and over again, and
Hmm.
it's because of how the technology was developed by Microsoft's investment in OpenAI. So Copilot uses the foundational training data of ChatGPT, but then on top of it, it uses your own information within Microsoft 365. For the nerds who care, Microsoft Graph is the real source. So anything that shows up in that Microsoft Graph is available to Copilot to be able to incorporate and work with and learn with. So some people might say, well, if I just use ChatGPT, that's free. Hey, what are some of the benefits here? And the idea is that it starts to train on your own data. So your own voice, your own branding starts to show up in the um, stuff that you're working with the Copilot that's going on. So it's not like ChatGPT where it's like, hey, set up an account and you have this free access to a certain build. There is a specific license required in Microsoft. And frankly, what it does is just like most prompt AIs that people have worked with, you ask it a question, you give it a command, and it will answer it by either generating content, modify content, or analyze data. So really, it's um, kind of like the next step of search engine where you put in queries looking for what you're like, looking for what you want, and then it'll start to kind of either generate content for you or work with content for you to get something going. Um, so kind of a good thing too to kind of take a perspective of is if you think of the really early days of Google search when it was, or even Yahoo search back in like the early 2000s, you really had to dial in those search terms that you had. And we're kind of at the same point with the AI now. And, it's with all the search data that's out there from Google, they're much better at guessing what you want because of um, just the sheer amount of time that it's had to kind of get used to what people are asking for, what was good, what was bad. So we're at that still early 2000s search engine portion. Um, so, we're used to the Google of today and how we forget the Google of 2004, right? All right. So what do you need to get started? For Copilot, it works with any Microsoft business license, starting with a minimum of Business Basic, which is the Microsoft's in email, SharePoint, OneDrive, and web apps, all the way up to Microsoft's Big Bad Enterprise 5, the E5 license, which has a whole bunch of compliance pieces, Pro Plus apps, conditional access and security products. So Copilot is an add-on to those licenses. So it's a standalone license. It's not included in any of those business package licenses yet. This webinar is being recorded August of 2024, but for right now, it's a standalone add-on license. What is nice is Microsoft at first said that it only wanted to deploy Copilot for organizations with 100 users or more. And they realized that was silly. And so they wound it back for saying, like, all right, well, we can do it for smaller organizations. However, you need to have an annual license. We're not going to have you sign up for a month for like $12 and then have you go, I don't like this and like run away. So it has an annual cost of $360 per year per user. There's no trial licenses. However, because of the way Microsoft licenses work now, you can cancel that annual license within 7 days. So effectively, if you stay on top of it, you got 7 days to be able to, um, you know, play with it, see if it's a good fit for you before you say, yeah, $360 isn't worth it. And everybody's different. Sometimes you see immediate value. Um, sometimes it's just one of those like, yeah, I just don't really have the bandwidth to try and learn how to use. prompt AI.
Mm.
And it again, it's just what makes sense for your business. Some people have time to train interns, some people don't. I get it. The good news is for getting started, once that license is applied to the account, it's very quick for it to start showing up. It shows up on the web after a log out, log back in pretty quickly. And then local applications like your locally installed Word, Excel, PowerPoint, if you go to the file, account, update license, and give the machine a restart, it will usually pull the magic Copilot button in for you, provided that you're signed in with the account you applied the license to. I will say, all said and done, Microsoft did a pretty good job with this one for actually being able to get it to show up to work on people's machines like right away. So now that we've kind of gone over what it does, what you need to get started, what does it look like? So this is the Copilot symbol. So you're going to see this pretty much anywhere the Copilot's going to try and do something. It's kind of the herald of like, hey, this is where the Copilot features live. Um, So you're going to see this show up across a multitude of your Microsoft applications from the starting portal to your Word documents, your Excel, your email, your calendar, Teams, pretty much anywhere you have apps, this little symbol is going to start to show up. And that's where like, hey, Copilot has a hook in here. So what does it look like? Again, wherever you see that symbol, you're going to see a spot for a prompt. So, but let's say that, is it really worth it for you have a chat GPT style prompt for it of asking like a couple of questions, have something explained to you. And, do you really want to do that in a Word document? Um, so, you know, th- there's a couple different spots and I wanted to show a few of them here, um, for when we were, getting started for it. So let me get one of my screens cleaned up for you. There's no need for you guys to see all the junk email that I get on a regular basis. But the first prompt, so this is just at portal.office.com, and this is where 365 has its launch, and you'll see there's our little favorite symbol that shows up. So if we whack that, this is going to be the classic ChatGPT style interface. This should look pretty familiar if you've worked with ChatGPT at all. And here you can say, you could add different context for files and people for like, hey, could you work with this? And it has some sample prompts that you could start with, and you can even ask like, hey, explain, explain in simple, how quantum computing works. So it'll still do foundational data, that ChatGPT style stuff, but then also it's really going to work with the information that you have as well. So it looks like it's going through my stuff first, and I figured a live demo would be a good one just to show you what it actually does, because I'm looking for being honest here for being able to get things going. So it's not super fast, it's not instantaneous, does comb, does crunch, and the good news is perfect. So it's actually grabbing foundational data for, hey, this is how it works, and this was one of the sample prompts that ChatGPT had, so I figured it would be a good first demo one. Oh, look at that. It even has me for the ability to make a new ebook about quantum computing.
Mm.
Interesting. So talk about content generation, right? Um, so that's one option for like, hey, you could use a classic ChatGPT prompt for like, hey, what's going on here? If you open Microsoft Word, if you open a new document, it's going to show up right on a blank document for like, hey, do you want to do something with ChatGPT here? And you also have in the upper right-hand corner, again, there's that little Copilot prompt, and it's going to open kind of a prompt thing to the right. So you could even say like, and especially too when you're working with it, again, it'll create content, it will edit content, or modify content that you have. So overwhelmingly, I've found that for creating content, if you're in like PowerPoint or Word and it's creating content bounds, it doesn't do a great job. Um, do I have, there is I had a sample, um, PowerPoint that I asked for a really meta joke. I asked
Mm-hmm.
Copilot to make a presentation about 6 things people don't know about Copilot, and it did a great job of creating a PowerPoint presentation of talking about Copilot, but it completely missed the mark and was talking about like airline pilots. I mean, the design was great, it had great um, graphics, design for the actual PowerPoint slides, a lot more robust than the usual title and bullet points that I do. So it might be that, hey, for the quick design stuff where you would normally be working in a Word document for trying to get the headers and all the formatting right, Copilot does a great job with that, but actually like putting together a halfway decent presentation, it's kind of hit or miss. So we could say we could have something for like create a flyer for the upcoming uh, company picnic on August 11th. So we could see what it comes up with just for kind of live fire. Um,
Yeah.
so where I have found internally where, again, like I said, some of this document and presentation, Copilot generation stuff isn't the greatest. Where I've found is, oh, look at this. It's just going to give me instructions instead. So sometimes you get it to actually do something, sometimes it gives you instructions. Fun. Um, where I have found it has been most powerful, to be honest, is Excel. So if anybody's been crunching data in Excel sheets, chances are you've come across macros at some point in like what you're doing where, you have the macro, and macros is effectively the ability to use programming language for the Excel data. There's a bunch of security issues with them because it's programming data. You can throw in a bunch of stuff to download things or open up other files that you're really not supposed to do. And so that can be a little difficult for you know, that can be a little difficult for getting um what's the word I'm looking for? Trying to like get that edge of working with Excel data. But sometimes you can very quickly, um, this is where when something starts to bump into computer programming is where Copilot really starts to shine because um, it was definitely a coding interface first for like, hey, help me write this piece of computer code. Um, so I only work in an Excel table. All right, so I guess I have to format this as a
Mm.
table. Let's say, please determine what the average. So I mean, you can ask questions about these data sets. And I found that it's kind of hit or miss. Sometimes if you ask the same prompt twice, it will give you two different answers, which is a little frustrating. But a great thing that I did with it, I'm just not going to show it just because it's private information, was just analyzing different clients, like, hey, how, hey, tell me a little bit of demographics of clients. Which clients have the most tickets per month? Which clients have the highest contacts? And it did a great job of data spat out in a CSV file, formatted into a table. But like for this example of like a disk utilization, please determine what the average disk utilization is. And we can see in real time what it's going to try and do. So again, kind of generating like documents, PowerPoints or Word documents, Copilot's pretty hit or miss. Excel is where I see it really shine. And then, yeah, see, calculated it pretty quick. And yeah, I know it's very easy to do highlight equals average for some of the formula stuff, but if you had something for like what's the average disk utilization for like per client. So let's say I had a whole bunch of different clients on here, it would determine that based on a client table. And um, so it it can be pretty powerful, but I just wanted to show what the prompting within
Yeah.
Excel looked like.
It's one of those things like when you're good at Excel and remember what those formulas are, it's like quick and easy. But when you're like you use Excel like twice a month or whatever, it's you could just put it in relatively natural language and say, what is this, this, and this within the bounds, of like it needs the column title and whatever. but it's much better at saying like, okay, yeah, you're looking for this kind of formula, and we can output that. And you don't have to know what concatenate is. You don't have to like dive into visual basic stuff.
Yeah. One other thing that I think Copilot is super powerful for, especially if you use 365 email, is that I've said before on other webinars about, ChatGPT and some of these AIs are like college interns that don't sleep. And they're
Hmm.
also not emotional, which is great. So let's say I get this email from a client. So I sent this from my personal email, and subject is unhappy. William, unhappy with the service your technician provided yesterday. He insulted my honor and I demand a refund and compensation. Regards. So here's an email that I get. And let's say you're me who hasn't been sleeping because of the newborn, so your emotional intelligence is at an all-time low. And maybe your first instinct would be firing something off to the client to be like, get out of here. The good news is, with ChatGPT, or rather, excuse me, Copilot, you can use it to, draft a response to it. So you can either say apologize and investigate. Um, again, there's the Chat GPT button up at the top. Um, we could also say anything you'd like to change. You could say, please incorporate the use of, nonviolent communication. Let's say there's a book you really like about dealing with people. So you could say, hey, try it with the nonviolent communication. So let's see it, it'll include um, so yeah, and it incorporated it. There's the observation, there's the feeling, this is the need, and then this is the request. So let's say, um, it's for different books and systems that are in that foundational training data and some of the usual suspects, traction. So most of those big books that you've worked with will have, you can say, hey, rewrite this email and this thing, and then just use that and just make sure it doesn't say something like, I hope your mother falls down a well or something really
Mhm.
insulting. The good news is even in my, uh, you know, worn down state, I can have the AI better communicate with the other party and talk them off the ledge. And I can use, if there's a like, I don't really want to talk to this guy, but just use the nonviolent communication because that seems to like get people off the ledge. Or if it was a negotiation, hey, incorporate the use of Chris Voss's never split the difference in the response to this email. So I will say something that's really powerful is the ability to have this straight in your email. And then, you might say, well, why can't I just do this with ChatGPT? Well, this goes a little bit to the security portion of it of if you are um, if you copy those emails into ChatGPT, you're adding it to the foundational training data. So you're effectively posting that information publicly. With ChatGPT, again, or Copilot, excuse me, everything stays internal. So it stays within your tenant, so your data doesn't make it out to whatever else is going out there. All right, so let's go a little bit into like working with prompts. So you've seen a little bit from the demos that I was doing there about what it looks like to work with prompts, some of the different fields that are there, and each different zone within the different apps is a little different. So for Word and Excel and PowerPoint, Copilot sits out to the side. In emails, Copilot is right in the actual response window of the email. Um, but also something that's really nice is Microsoft has decent documentation for once for like everyday people for, hey, how do I work with the different prompts for Copilot? What are some example prompts? What are ones that, we're seeing good traction with for um, actual good like analysis and this is getting me something of value. And that's at copilot.cloud.microsoft. Um, and then ENUS is just English and then prompts. So the test prompts are a huge help, especially Excel. I would honestly say if you're getting started with a lot of Copilot stuff, I'd start in Excel because that it's going to start to show you your like when you're asking the different questions, how is it working with it? Where does Copilot kind of fall short? Starting right away with PowerPoint presentations can be hey, a little difficult. So Like yeah, great examples like, hey, bold the top 10 values in spreadsheet X or table X. So super, straightforward for being able to ask it to modify data that you already
Mm,
have. One thing that's really important is you have to be clear with it though. I love using that example of a college intern. College interns aren't great at really inferring things because they're very new. So a prompt really depends on the quality of your ask as much as the capability of the AI. So you have to formulate what you're looking for, um, just as much as the AI has to have a certain degree of capacity. Because again, it's in that early stage of search. So a lot of the inference stuff isn't quite there as much yet. So you have to be very specific for what you're asking for. Um, so, something specific, summarize these emails between these two people in two bulleted points. Very specific for like what you're looking for. It could be context, like, hey, I'm um, looking to write a blog post about team building, make it sound professional and witty, and incorporate comments about generational differences. Maybe that's something you need to include. Um, and then you can also ask it to, you know, be very specific about next action items. And then, of course, always make sure to review and revise. So, like when I asked like, what is Copilot? Copilot is a human airline pilot. No, no, no. It's an AI assistant. Sometimes you got to watch for what it's actually spitting out, because just like
mm.
you wouldn't take something that an intern made and immediately put it out, you got to check the work. So, what are the benefits? I think the number one benefit is taking emotion out of communications. So like you saw, I use it to write emails using nonviolent communication. I love Marshall Rosenberg's book. I think it's great I think the examples that he lists, and especially in a field like ours where things can be very contentious, um, having having a filter to be able to have somebody change the language for you is incredibly helpful, especially if there is a certain style that you um, work best with. Analyzing exported CSV files in Excel instead of using macros. Hey, what is my average time? What is the total time spent per client, um, based on this table? Super easy to analyze, and where you might have to sit there and, all right, I got to figure out per client, and then I have to summarize this. It does all that coding stuff for you. Um, I think it's really great at generating graphics and formatting for presentations quickly, but the content needs a lot of work. Content is definitely where, it's very generic stuff that it's spitting back out. It's not really insightful presentations. And then also at the end of the day, it's ChatGPT informed by your own communications and data. So if you have a certain way of speaking to, you can have it make brand voice documents, and it will eventually get there as it learns. But beyond the benefits, the next question is the guardrails. So it's not a panacea. It's not going to replace whole departments of people unless your whole departments of people are programmers that just copy from GitHub anyways, which based on most of the attendees here is not the target market we're talking to. The data has to be in Microsoft 365 environment. It doesn't see your Gmail. It doesn't see things on the desktop unless your desktop is hooked up to OneDrive, or it doesn't see Salesforce or any other repositories of data that you might have. It has to be in it has to be in the Microsoft environment for Copilot to be able to play with it. Again, this is at best an intern, which sometimes you get some kick-ass interns, right? And so, but even with kick-ass interns, you still don't want to publish work from them straight to clients. So don't do the same thing for an AI generated content. Give it that second pair of eyes, give it an adjustment, and keep an eye on it. So, especially to a guardrail that Microsoft has put in, because I mentioned the ChatGPT public data portion. Your data and the prompts and the things you're working with don't go outside your Microsoft 365 tenant. The foundational model is pretty much ChatGPT under the hood and is all public, like asking about, hey, tell me about quantum computing. But your data, including prompts and responses, are kept internally. So you could even ask it maybe like, hey, how do I talk about motivating my employee XYZ? It's going to be able to see that employee's information, and all that stuff is kept, pretty internal. So it's just remember that it's within your Microsoft 365 tenant. So in summary, for the 6 things you got to know, you need a business license and the Microsoft Copilot license for M365. What does it do? It acts like ChatGPT, but uses your own data as well. How do you use it? It pops up in each Microsoft application from the portal to Word, Excel, Outlook. In working with it, the question matters. Crafting a prompt is all in how you ask the question, which I'm sure everyone here knows for any time they're working with another human being. At the end of the day, the big benefit is it's an always-on intern who's there to help you out, but put guardrails on the intern. They're not completely experienced yet. And that's about all I have. So are there any questions for working with Copilot or anything that anybody has here?
One of my immediate thoughts is when we're talking about per user kind of license and pulling data from the business, is how is that sort of interacting? Because I know sometimes it's like I don't always know how like the OneDrive data stuff is structured. You have like the business, and then you have people forking off of the business. Like like there's the system support OneDrive. There's mine. There's yours. If say it's just you using Copilot, is it also pulling from the things I have that I haven't put in the central shared file, or do you have to get everyone each like individual silo of license?
So you do for each user who needs
Mhm.
to use it, you need to
Yeah,
get a license.
yeah,
As far as if company of 3 people, each person wants to use Copilot, it's
mhm,
one license per user. It's not for the whole tenant.
yeah.
For the information, it uses Microsoft Graph as where that like, hey, what data is available to what, and the permissions for that data is set at that Microsoft Graph level. That's
Okay,
Microsoft's fancy words of like that's the foundational place something is stored. So it would it would not comb across the other people's OneDrives. The idea being that,
mhm,
hey, let's say a marketing manager has a Copilot, and let's say there's a bunch of sensitive stuff that the
mhm.
CEO has in their own OneDrive as opposed to the shared SharePoint. Yeah, it's not going to allow that because the account making the request doesn't have permissions to that location. It won't make the it won't make the move across. It does all start with what does that user account's permission
Okay,
have? And Graph is where a lot of those permissions are set.
okay. That
So
that that makes sense. So like the up at the top, you could get whatever, but if you're like, oh, marketing, and suddenly like all the all the sensitive financial information has been put onto like a web graphic for some reason.
yeah, it's hey, or all the disciplinary records for an employee. An employee gets Copilot and wants to see what the other employees have gotten in trouble for. It's like, okay, those need to, you need the guardrails for
Wow.
where the information is stored is important. Yeah,
Okay, so
it doesn't
it
wash
just
the whole
has those
tenant.
by default. That's good.
It doesn't wash the whole tenant. It definitely, stays within like, okay, these are the permissions that this user has permissions to this data. So it's a good question.
Yeah.
Well, hearing no other major questions coming through, though I totally understand if you get trying to get to your keyboard, find the
Yeah.
window, put it in the background type deal. The we're also offering to, if you work with us and we manage your 365, more than happy to set up a time for setting up a Copilot demo where, hey, who do you want to try this license out? Let's get it. And then on the sixth day, we'll check in to say, hey, is this something that you want to continue with, or should you cancel the licenses and it wasn't worth it at the end of the day? You can just shoot us an email at yeah, info@systemsupport.com and we can get that set up for you. And um, but Corey says it looks useful. I could use a good intern. Yes, but it's definitely like a good intern. You need to you gotta work with them a little bit to get up to speed. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's just learning how to work with it. But the good news is the intern's always on, doesn't sleep, doesn't get in fights with a significant other. So it's you can have fun with it. But yeah, I would definitely recommend just getting the license, trying it out for 6 days. I would not be surprised if most people got value just out of the email response portion because it definitely can help you from sending a stupid response, that's for sure. So, well, that's about it. I hope everybody has had a great day. Hope everybody gets a chance to, hopefully the weather improves and people get a chance to go outside. We'll see you guys next time.